Labor Secretary Alex Acosta long hovered under the radar in President Trump's Washington, but a plea deal he brokered in 2008 for Jeffery Epstein has cast a shadow over him. And this week, it effectively forced him out, following developments that brought up tough questions about his judgment. Federal prosecutors in New York charged Epstein on Monday with new sex crimes. Acosta's critics said he was too soft on Epstein a decade ago. On Wednesday, Acosta defended himself at a news conference.
This was the view of the office. There is a value to a sure guilty plea because letting him walk, letting what the state attorney was ready to do go forward would have been absolutely awful.
But the firestorm did not fade, and Acosta submitted his resignation to the president on Friday.
It would be selfish for me to stay in this position and continue talking about a case that's 12 years old rather than about the amazing economy we have right now. And so I submitted my resignation to the president effective 7 days from today.
I just want to let you know this was him, not me, because I'm with him.
Joining me tonight, Paula Reed, White House correspondent for CBS News, Philip Rucker, White House bureau chief for The Washington Post, Kimberly Atkins, senior Washington correspondent for WBUR, Boston's NPR news station, and Jerry Seib, executive Washington editor for The Wall Street Journal. Paula, you cover the Department of Justice and the White House. You've been tracking the New York prosecutors. Why did they decide to come back on the Epstein case a decade later? What prompted this action over last weekend?
Some great reporting by the Miami Herald. The story around Epstein had really gone stale, but over the last year, the Miami Herald started digging into these allegations against Epstein once again, and they uncovered this 2007-2008 plea deal that had been brokered by then U.S. Attorney Acosta to help resolve these allegations of misconduct against young women by Mr. Epstein. And under this deal, he got just 13 months, and this also gave him immunity from federal charges. Well, earlier this year, a federal judge found that this deal violated the victims' rights because they did not disclose to the victims that they were negotiating this plea deal. The Justice Department opened another investigation, and then we saw earlier this week these new charges and these new allegations. These occurred between 2002 and 2005.
And many of Acosta's critics said the deal he struck in 2008 was too soft, that he could have went forward. Acosta said he did what he could, but the state prosecutors wouldn't move forward enough. Did his argument hold up?
Yeah, the explanation that he gave really left a lot of folks like me scratching their heads. It was a false choice. He said he could have either allowed him to walk free under state prosecution or negotiate this deal, which is the only deal that he could negotiate, which absolutely isn't true. As a prosecutor, he had discretion over that. He certainly could have, at the very least, notified the victims. But the fact that he didn't is what led to this entire controversy, that he was entirely too soft, given what we see now is the severity of the charges. I mean, this is really, really serious, horrific trafficking of people underage, and that he got 13 months is just really remarkable.
Let's go over those charges. On Monday, federal prosecutors in New York indicted Epstein on new charges: one count of sex trafficking of minors, one count of conspiracy to engage in sex trafficking. Epstein pleaded not guilty. According to the indictment, Epstein and a friend were running a, quote, vast network of underage girls for sex, some as young as 14. And they say the 66-year-old financier knew the victims were under 18. I'm so glad we have two attorneys here, in Paula and Kim. We also have a great bureau chief in Phil Rucker. President Trump was watching this Wednesday news conference. What did he take away, and why did Epstein end up resigning? Excuse me, why did Acosta end up resigning?
Yeah, so Trump wanted Acosta to do this news conference, wanted his secretary to get out there to defend himself against these headlines, against these allegations that he had done something wrong as the U.S. attorney. But the performance was not the kind of performance we're used to from people when they're trying to please the president. He lacked passion. He lacked indignation. You'll remember when Brett Kavanaugh, in his confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court, defended himself. He did so with a lot of vigor and passion and indignation and anger, and Trump really liked that. And so I think Trump wasn't sure what to make of Acosta's performance, started asking around, and fast forward to Friday, and Acosta's out.
And he also did not apologize to the victims, Jerry.
Yeah, and I think the way the victims were treated may have been the biggest part of at least the public relations problem here, maybe even the legal problem too. The not telling the victims what you were doing struck a lot of people, I think, as kind of the worst of the sins that were committed down in Florida. But I think the backdrop of this that's really important to remember is that this is just continuing turnover within the Trump administration, a remarkable level of turnover. I did a sort of a score sheet for myself today. 9 cabinet secretaries have resigned. We have an administration that has acting or temporary, not permanent, White House Chief of Staff, Homeland Security Secretary, Defense Secretary, UN Ambassador, head of the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Service. Those are all temporary, not permanent people. There's a lot of turnover, and it is kind of administration on autopilot to some extent. The White House will blame Democrats in the Senate for not confirming people fast enough, but that's not the core of this problem.
Phil mentioned how the president was watching Secretary Acosta's performance, but White House officials I was talking to also said the president wanted to distance himself from the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein he had in Palm Beach decades ago in the 1990s at the Mar-a-Lago Club. Paula actually asked President Trump about that relationship in the Oval Office earlier this week. Let's see that.
Mr. President,
Okay,
do you still
anybody
think
else?
Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy?
Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I mean, people in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his.
The president's words, not a fan. But what is the real history here?
Well, back in 2002, for a profile on Epstein in New York Magazine, the president was quoted as saying that he thought Epstein was a terrific guy, and the two had been friends for 15 years. The president noted that they shared a taste for beautiful women, but he even noted in that article that Epstein tended to like them on the younger side. So it's interesting, here in the Oval Office earlier this week, he's like, yeah, I don't really like the guy. We had a falling out. But what's so strange is that he would not answer earlier this week what that falling out was about. So earlier today at the White House, when he had this press availability, I pressed him again. He tried to dismiss it. He said it doesn't matter. I said it does matter. Was this a business dispute, or was this about his abuse of underage girls? He confirmed a story that has been out there that he threw him out of Mar-a-Lago after there were complaints about Epstein's behavior towards young women. But again, I find it unusual that the president nor the White House would confirm that story as the reason for their falling out all week.
Phil, you have a White House that says this issue is now dead because Secretary Acosta is going away. They say President Clinton also knew Epstein, and his office, President Clinton's, issued a statement this week that read in part, quote, President Clinton knows about nothing about these terrible crimes that Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago. And the statement goes on to say that Clinton has not spoken with Epstein in well over a decade. So that's what conservatives and Republicans are saying. Does this issue go away for President Trump?
No, I don't think the issue goes away until President Trump offers a fuller accounting of his relationship with Epstein. I mean, Epstein's behavior with women, as Paula was just noting from the 2002 article, from Trump's quote in that article, has been an open secret in Palm Beach for years. We need to try to know, what did Trump know? When did he know it? Did he know that Epstein was with these younger women? Did he do anything about it? Could he have witnessed some of this behavior? Who knows? Did it happen at his clubs? We don't know, but these are all questions the president's going to continue to face until he answers them.
Is the character question something that could be a factor?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we are in the Me Too era, right? And so these things have particular resonance right now. And I think, the question of who knew what and when did they know it is an inescapable one in a situation like this. And you have to remember also, there's going to be an ongoing legal proceeding now. This is going to be played out in the courts. It's not going to go away because it's going to be on full display in courtrooms up in New York for some time to come.
Jerry brought up how now there's so many acting secretaries inside of this government. You also have a new person at the Department of Labor, Patrick Pizzella, a conservative favorite. Was Secretary Acosta also facing pressure from conservatives, not just over the Epstein case?
Absolutely.
Why?
I mean, when I was talking to Republicans close to the White House and on the Hill this week, their number one complaint was about the job that Acosta was doing, not necessarily his treatment of this case at the time. They believe that he was not rolling back regulatory efforts fast enough, sort of rolling back the Obama regulations with the speed and gusto that President Trump wanted, and they wanted him out already. And so the pressure that built up, there was actually a concern that Donald Trump wanting to fight the Democrats' call for his resignation might keep him in office longer. But all of those things seem to converge, and as well as his lackluster defense of himself, seem to converge to make it untenable.
And some of those complaints were coming from the business community also, and that's a voice that's heard in this
They,
White House
they thought
as
he was
well.
too close to the unions, or?
Not fast enough rolling back
Regulations,
Not
fiduciary duty regulations, regulations involving workplace rules, just wanting to be more pro-business.
Now, I think to be fair to Secretary Acosta, I think his argument was, look, if you don't do these things carefully, then you may roll them back, and you'll find in the courts that they get rolled back forward again. And we've seen that in this administration. So his argument was, do it slowly, but do it right.